Shabbat shalom, everyone. If you drive north on I-35 and you get past the capital city, you will soon see a sign for one of my favorite tourist traps of the 90s. I'm talking, of course, about inner space caverns. I know this because recently when I was driving in the minivan with my boys near Round Rock, Georgetown-ish, one of them said, "Hey, Dad, have you ever been to inner space caverns?" And I said, "Heck yes, I've been to inner space caverns." I think I went to inner space caverns probably 36 times in the year 1998. That was the thing to do when I was a kid. Whether you were in a Boy Scout group or if you had a youth group or you were on a school field trip, everybody from Bell County would make the schlep down I-35 to inner space caverns. And then afterwards, we'd go to the now defunct, I don't know if anyone of you remembers this, there's a defunct candle factory that used to be across the street. Inner space caverns, candle factory. What those two had in common, I don't know, but we went there a zillion times. And I remember we used to beg to go to Natural Bridge Caverns here in San Antonio because we said at least that cave is something different, but the adults in charge only wanted inner space because they claimed they could get a better group rate. So I must have gone a gazillion times in my youth. I could probably give you all the guided tour of inner space caverns if we went there because I heard that shtick so many times. I was telling my boys that I vividly remember the first time I ever went to inner space caverns. It was with my Boy Scout troop, Pack 228. And the reason I remember it was because the tour guide we had was really terrible and probably slightly psychotic. This guy, I think, was probably like 20-ish years old, and it was obvious that he wanted more out of life than being a tour guide at inner space caverns, just based on how he dressed and looked. He fancied himself like a hardcore Marine soldier on a mission. He's one of those people that have like a military buzz cut, not because they have to, just because they want to. And I remember I was particularly impressed because he carried with him a big Bowie knife, and they even let him carry a gun in the cave, which when you're 9 years old seems really cool. So I remember one of the kids asked him, they said, "Hey, mister, why do you have a gun?" And when he responded, 9-year-old me couldn't tell if he was joking or being serious. He said, "Just in case we run into bears." Bears? In Georgetown? There's no bears in inner space caverns. Now, I know that now, but back then, the last thing any kid wanted to hear as they descended into a cave is that there could be bears here. So many bears I have to have a gun that I might shoot them? What kind of psychopath does this to kids? This guy. In fact, I remember he did a lot of kind of crazy stuff while we were on that tour. As we were walking through the cave, droplets of water are falling from the ceiling onto us, and I remember he said, "Watch out for those droplets, they can give you cancer." What? No. I remember there was a mom whose kid was in the group with us. Somebody peer pressured her into being a chaperone for this trip. And I remember he kept hitting on her over and over and made everyone really uncomfortable. And I remember thinking, if she turns this guy down, we're going to be stuck in this cave forever. She's got to marry him someday, or we'll all just live here forever. This guy was just a walking nightmare. But the one thing he did that I still think about is there was this part of the cave, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's a really large cavernous room. And he had us all gather ourselves in a little circle. And he began telling a story about the people who first discovered the cave, supposedly while they were building I-35. He said, "The first explorer who found this cave lowered themselves through a hole in the cave ceiling, and when they first descended in this very room, there was complete darkness." And when he said complete darkness, he turned out all the lights in the cave. Ooh. Now, as I said earlier, when you're a little kid, stuff like this is kind of exciting and fun, and also slightly terrifying, because cave darkness is really dark. I had never experienced any darkness like that before. I had never been exposed to what they call true darkness. And I remember this weird dude, he said, "Put your hands in front of your face and see if you can make out the details." And I did. And I couldn't see my own hand. It actually really startled me because I couldn't see anything anywhere. And if that wasn't enough, the guy then pretended to be unable to turn the lights back on. Like, what a jerk. He was like, "Oh, where's the switch? How do I turn this on?" Oh. And we just stood there terrified in the dark, totally helpless, and unable to free ourselves from this psychopath's disturbing little game he was playing with us underground in the cave. And then, suddenly, out of nowhere, there was light. Not a lot. Our idiot tour guide still hadn't turned the lights back on. But I saw a beam of light emanating from my left side. And when I turned to see what was going on, I realized that one of the boys in my troop, my friend Mark, had turned on a small flashlight that he was holding. Perhaps the reason I remember this so vividly was because I can recall that that tiny sliver of light had seemingly illuminated the whole room. And when he had turned it on, I remember there was a sigh of relief from everyone in our tour group, kids and adults. And I remember thinking that it was amazing, remarkable even, that a child just like me could change the perception and alleviate the fears of our whole troop. Friends, in our Torah portion for this week, Parshat Bo, the Egyptians find themselves in a similar dark circumstance. After having already been pummeled by several earlier plagues, this Parsha introduces the plague of darkness, Choshech, which we're told only affected the Egyptians, while the Jews were, quote, able to enjoy light in their dwellings. The Torah tells us that this darkness wasn't just an absence of light. The Torah tells us it was a thick darkness, a darkness that could almost be felt, the kind of darkness that paralyzes you, a darkness where people, quote, could not see one another and could not rise from where they were. Now that line is simple, but it always gets to me. They couldn't see one another because darkness doesn't obscure our surroundings. It oftentimes isolates us from each other. And if you think about it, that's usually how darkness works in our own lives. When we are going through something painful, like grief, or an illness, or a depression, or fear, it can feel exactly like being stuck in that cave, disoriented, helpless, unable to move forward. And worst of all is that feeling of feeling completely alone. The Talmud picks up on this idea in a really powerful way. This is one of my favorite anecdotes from the Gemara. This is from Tractate Barachot 5b. We're told about Rabbi Elazar, who became gravely ill, and his friend and colleague Rabbi Yochanan went to visit him. And when he entered the room, we're told it was very dark. And Rabbi Elazar was lying on the floor in the darkness. So Rabbi Yochanan uncovered his arm, and we're told light filled the space. Now the rabbis argue what that light actually was. Some say it was a literal light, that Rabbi Yochanan's skin was illuminated. Others say this was completely metaphorical. But either way, according to the story, Rabbi Yochanan looked at Rabbi Elazar and asked him, "Are your sufferings dear to you?" And Rabbi Elazar responded, "No, neither them nor their reward." And at that moment, Rabbi Yochanan did something incredibly human. He reached out his hand and helped Rabbi Elazar stand up. And here comes the most beautiful part of this story. The Gemara then asks a sharp question about this scene. They say, why couldn't Rabbi Elazar heal himself? And the answer the Talmud gives is simple and powerful, and yet somewhat devastating. It says, quote, "A prisoner cannot free himself from prison." My friends, even the greatest of rabbis, even a person of deep faith and wisdom, sometimes cannot escape their own darkness alone. They need someone else to enter the cave with them. We all need others to bring light, to say, "I'm here," or to hold out a hand to lift us up. That's what my friend Mark did that day at Inner Space Caverns. He didn't solve the situation. He couldn't overpower the darkness. He just turned on a little flashlight. And somehow, that was enough. And that's what the Torah is hinting at in Parshat Bo. Yes, the Israelites had light in their dwellings, but friends, light is not meant to be hoarded. Light is meant to be shared with one another. I don't have to tell you that it feels like we're living in dark times, and that there is fear in our world, and anger, and loneliness, with so many people walking around carrying invisible caves inside of them. Most of us don't have the power to fix everything. We can't turn all the lights back on at once. But we can be flashlights for one another, even if that just means a simple phone call, or a visit, or a text, or an act of kindness, or even just a moment of presence for the other person. You never know when a small beam of light offered at the right moment can change the entire room. So this Shabbat, I pray that we can be the kind of people who bring flashlights instead of fear, who offer a steady hand instead of bad jokes, and who, when others are stuck in the dark, don't play games with the light switch. Shabbat Shalom.